So would you just welcome Natalie Grant? Welcome to El Paso. We're so happy you're here.
Thank you.
And we were
glad to be
just,
here.
Jimmy and I were just talking about how you have like the coolest mic in history.
I know.
It's so pretty.
It's shiny.
Shiny and pretty.
Shiny and pretty.
Hey, so, we're just going to have a conversation this morning, and she's going to share a little bit about who she is. And so for starters, I just wanted you to just tell us, how did you get to this amazing stage that you're at in life right now?
Some days it feels amazing, right? But some days it feels like, oh. But, obviously I was born and raised in Seattle, Washington, and all of my family still lives there. And if you know anything about the city of Seattle, they say it's the least church city in the nation. Less than 1% of the population claim to go to church of any kind. So the fact that I was born into a Christian family by the grace of God and raised in the church, I'm forever grateful for. And what's interesting is I live in Nashville now with my husband. We've been married for 17 years and have been in Nashville that whole time. And when I first came to Nashville, I thought, this is going to be summer camp. Like, this is the place where Christians live. Like, everybody's a Christian, and it's going to be amazing. And I soon realized that just because you have a lot of religion does not mean you have a lot of Jesus. And there is a huge difference. And I became so grateful for where I was raised, because I was raised in a place where you were challenged every day about why you believe what you believe. If you were a Christian, you were unintelligent, you weren't educated, if you believed that silly book called the Bible. And it made me very sure about why I believe what I believe from a young age. And it was like, oh, wait a second. I didn't just grow up in church and it was the popular thing to do. It was like a club. Jesus was my lifeline. And I think that, realizing in different parts of the country, like, oh my goodness, this is what you call religion. This is a social club. And these people, we talk about going outside of the church, but a lot of people inside of the church actually need to find Jesus. And I really discovered that living in Nashville. And I moved to Nashville. I went to college in Seattle, a small little Christian college. This thing used to be a hairbrush. And you people used to be my stuffed animals. And I used to introduce myself in my parents' basement and come sliding in on my socks. I never thought this would be a real thing that I got to do in real life. So I actually went to college to become a first grade teacher. My major was elementary education, and I was telling the pastor yesterday that I homeschooled my twin daughters for kindergarten, and we just all need to pause for a moment and thank the Lord that I actually did not become a teacher, because I'm a terrible one. Oh my word. I, halfway through university, my third year of university, there was a singing group, a Christian singing group, that was around for a lot of years called Truth. And wow, look at you, El Paso. And they came through my home church in Seattle, and I just remember sitting there going, that would be cool. I could take a year off of school and go travel and do that, because I loved to sing in my church. I'm a local church girl all the way. I loved singing on worship team. We had a youth choir that traveled all over the world. I loved being involved in church music, but I just never thought about doing it professionally. And it was my dad, who is an amazing man, but also he and I shouldn't be embarrassed about this, because I know so many of you would dream about having a dad like I do. He really is a dream father, but I can be with him when I'm home in Seattle, and we're at Costco, and he's like, do you know this girl's the best singer in the world? I mean, I don't know if you know that, but she's the greatest singer in the world. So he actually walked up to the head of Truth, his name was Roger Breland, and said, I don't know if you know this, but we have the greatest singer in the world right here in our church. And my dad is actually who got me that initial audition. And I auditioned for that, left college, went to go do that, and never looked back. And it was what I like to call Christian music boot camp. I got paid $50 a week. to sing like 8 concerts in 7 days every week for 340 days out of the year. But it was amazing because it really made me discover my calling and what I was called to do. And then moved to Nashville, and long story short, got a record deal, put a record out, and on my first single, the record company went out of business. And so then I got a second record deal, and was myself and this other singer named Katie Hudson, who became Katy Perry. And she started out as a Jesus singer. Let's just pause for a moment and pray that she sometime returns to that, because whatever is in her when she is old, she will not depart from it. So let's believe that she'll return. But that record company went out of business. So now I'm like, maybe I was actually supposed to be a school teacher after all. And third record deal I got. And I think that what those hardships did, though, is it changed me from a drive to just succeed to okay, this is actually what God has called me to do. And though these doors are closing, there will be a door that no man can shut. And I feel like I'm living proof of that. So,
wow, that is so awesome.
that was a long answer. I'm so sorry.
It was a great answer. So, talking about hardships, I know, it wasn't just in your career that you faced hardships. You've been so open about a struggle that so many women face in life. And I know there are women here today, they've come to me, they're so excited that you're here for this very reason. So can you talk about the process that you went through? I mean, you've got 3 beautiful girls, and they're just precious. And I love how, I want you to know that right now in the back, she's on the phone with them because one of them fell down, and she is mommy all day, every day, and that is spectacular. She's not just a rock star. She's a mommy too, and her girls know that, and they love her. And so, just share that testimony with us of that whole process.
I will, and before I do, I will share that. If any of you actually do follow me on social media, you realize I post pictures of my children at nauseum, and that's like total hashtag sorry, not sorry. But I was on the phone with my youngest daughter who had just fallen off of a bar stool, and she fell on her tailbone. And she was crying, saying, "Mommy, I broke my bottom. I broke my bottom." And I said, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry." She said, "I know, but it's really a problem because I can't shake my boo-hiney. Like, I can go in, but I can't go out." Oh, and if you follow me, you know that I'm talking about Sadie, and you know that you actually do need to pause for a moment and pray for us all because she is a piece of work. And you'll understand in a few moments why I believe she has that gusto in her, because she was never supposed to be here. And, I chose to be really open on social media a few years ago. I remember thinking, I don't know about this whole social media thing. It's obviously, there's a lot of good and a lot of negative, because I do think that typically everybody puts their best foot forward. They can make their life look like anything on Instagram, and what it does is it just plants a seed in those of us who don't have that life of like a dissatisfaction with our own, and a feeling like we need to be better or different or striving or working harder, and it's just, I don't know, it's like anti-God to me in that way. So I decided a long time ago just to be very real on it. My Facebook or whatever, it started growing over 1 million people, and I'm actually not, that's not a humble brag. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying that in a way that it was like this massive audience. And I thought, I can either keep talking about my music or, these cool things I get to do, which I talk about that too. Or I can be real and realize that these people aren't fans. We're the family of God. We are the family of God. And this idea that those of us in ministry set ourselves up here and you guys are down there, no, we're like this. We're just all imperfect people in need of a perfect God. And I noticed that when I started talking about my struggles, the connection became totally different. And it was like, okay, this is a whole nother way to connect with people. And I feel like this struggle connected with people in a way like, especially with women, in a way that I didn't expect. Maybe that's because not a lot of people talk about the struggle with fertility. And so then you don't realize how many women are struggling to have a child. And I will never forget, I was about to perform at the Grand Ole Opry for the very first time. And I don't know if any of you know anything about country music. Like, I wasn't a country music person, but living in Nashville, now I know a whole lot more. But the Grand Ole Opry is like the mother of, stages of country music. And if you know who the Judds are, I was about to perform with Winona. And it was like, okay, this is like a moment in life. I'm going on stage at the Grand Ole Opry with Winona. And my husband and I had been trying to have a baby for, a year or so, and we'd gone to a doctor, and so I'm just getting ready to go on stage. I'm in my dressing room, and I get a phone call, and it's the doctor that said, can you just take a minute? And I'm like, oh, okay, sure, because, you're not thinking it's going to be bad news. And he said, I'm sorry, but you and your husband have less than a 3% chance. I don't know how they come up with 3, 2, 1, 5. I don't know. All I know is he said, you're just not going to be able to have children. And I just remember in that moment, I was about to go out on stage and sing a song that says, he'll bring it all together for good. And we can amen that. But at the same time, I didn't believe it. Right? Because sometimes you can amen it because you want to believe it, but in your heart, if we're honest, we're like, what on earth? There's no way. How can good be brought of this? And we have all these clever Christian phrases like faith over fear. But if I'm really honest, so often it's my fear over my faith. Like when I get bad news, it's like instantaneously the fear just sets in and the faith begins to be drowned out. And I remember walking out on that stage and singing those words, and I felt like the whole world was spinning. And my husband wasn't even with me. So then I had to go and tell him the news. Fast forward, and we decided to go through something called IVF. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but let me pause for a moment and say that was a struggle because of how I was raised, in this idea that God's going to provide the miracle, God's going to provide the miracle. But sometimes he provides the miracle through modern medicine, because you cannot separate God and science. People can try, but you can't. Science is only possible because of our intelligent God, who gives men the wisdom to be able to do those things. And so there are no such thing, in my mind, there's no such thing as a second-class miracle. So for me, God was going to work that miracle through modern medicine. And we started going through the process of in vitro. And what's amazing is, and I'll tell more about this story later, but if anybody knows about what IVF is, it's a lot of shots, 76 shots in my stomach and my backside. I counted every single one. Thank you very much. And I remember I had to give myself my very first shot. And for those of you that have diabetes or something, and you realize that first time you have to do it, it's so terrifying, because you are like, it's not normal to plunge a needle into yourself. Like, that is not normal behavior. And I remember I was in England, and the way the time zone worked out, I was at this conference called Cherish at this church in Bradford by a pastor named Charlotte Gambill. And she had taken us to this clothing store. I don't even remember what little town it was in, but it was this little boutique, and we were shopping. And I'm sitting in a dressing room, and I have my little syringe in my purse, and I have not told a soul outside of my husband that we're doing this. And I'm sitting in this dressing room, and my palms are sweating, and I don't know how I'm supposed to give myself a shot, and I'm just freaking out, and my alarm is going off on my phone like, it's time, it's time, it's time. And everything about IVF is like, you have to be right on target. And there was a knock on the dressing room door in this little clothing store, and Charlotte said, "What are you doing in there?" And I was like, "Oh, just trying on a dress. I'll be out in just a minute. And she said, no, what are you doing in there? And I just remember opening the door, and I'm like, she's going to think I'm doing drugs in here. I've got this needle in my hand. I'm like, ah. And she comes in, and she literally is like, God told me to come to your dressing room. And she struggled with fertility, and I never knew it. And she went through the exact same thing that I was about to go through, and I never knew it. And here I had, at that exact moment, a God-provided friend that was teaching me how to give myself that shot. You think God's not in the details? He's in every detail of our lives. And for me, that was just a reminder that God's got this. And the miracle is that we went on to have our twin daughters, Gracie and Bella. Fast forward 4 years after that, it was the day of the Nashville flood. And I woke up and I just recognized that feeling, like, you know, if those of you who have been pregnant before, that feeling of like, sorry if you're guys in here, plug your ears, but like, ow, like that feeling. And I was like, oh no. No. Like there was no medicine, no shots, no nothing. And they said that this couldn't happen. And we got 2 babies in one. We had our whole family. Thank you very much. But it was the miracle that we never knew to ask for. And I just remember because I had a 4-year-old expired pregnancy test in the drawer of my bathroom. And I took it, and that positive sign popped up so fast. And literally the Nashville flood was like, you couldn't drive. And I was like, I came screaming out of the bathroom. And I said to my husband, I don't care if you got to get in a boat. I don't care what you got to do. Go to the drugstore and buy every brand because clearly this thing is wrong. So he found a way to Walgreens in the Nashville flood and brought home 12 different pregnancy tests. I have never drunk so much water in all my life. And I'm like, whoop, that one's positive too. Drank more water, whoop, that one's positive too. Anyway, Sadie is our third miracle. And she was born with no modern medicine intervention. But if just to know her, you realize that God definitely has a plan for her life. And you know, when I talk about this, do I believe that God can grant these miracles to any one of us? I do, but do I believe he's going to? For every one of you that struggle? I don't. And I can't, it's sometimes really hard for me to talk about because I feel like there's someone in this room right now who's been begging God for these exact same miracles for 10 years, who's gone through the treatments and it didn't work for them. And they're like, this is so awesome for you to talk about, but you got the miracle. What about me? I'm sitting here and I haven't gotten the miracle. And while I do believe with all of my heart that God can do anything he wants to do, the thing is he can do it. But sometimes, do I believe he'll give you the desires of your heart? I do. But his miracle, he will give you the miracle. But it might look a little bit different than you think it needs to or that it's going to. Do I believe that he will make you a mother? I do. Do I believe that's necessarily going to be through IVF? Not necessarily. Do I believe you might birth your own? Maybe. Not necessarily. Do I think it might be through adoption or foster care or through your church, grabbing a hold of girls who are desperate for a mom in their life? I don't know how it's going to play out in your life, but I know that he will give you the desires of your heart. And while I wish that I could say it's going to be exactly like he did it for me, trust him. Because his ways are good and his plans are perfect. And he is God and we are not. And when the Bible says that his ways are higher than ours, it means his ways are higher than ours. And we think, because we're women, we think we know best, but he knows best. He knows best. So.
Wow. So good. How many of you just appreciate her transparency? It's spectacular. So there's a second part to that story. After you had Sadie, you faced another struggle that I know a lot of women face. And again, it's something that for some weird reason we're uncomfortable talking about, and we shouldn't be. because we know God has a solution for it. Would you share that with us?
So this one's harder for me to talk about because I feel like I just got done telling the story of how God gave me a miracle I didn't even ask for. And so many women are so desperate for that miracle. How dare I then question why he gave it to me? And feel like I wasn't cut out for it and I couldn't do it. And I struggled with postpartum depression for about 18 months after the birth of Sadie. And I remember times feeling like I couldn't even get out of my bed. And the thing is that I dealt with it so privately because we don't talk about depression enough in the church. And I think it's because we just think it's such a black mark on our faith that if we admit that we're depressed, it means that we're a terrible Christian. It means that we have a lack of faith and that we just don't trust God. And well, yeah, I did have a lack of faith, and no, I wasn't trusting God. But I also feel like because of my platform, I write songs and record songs and sing songs that help people have faith in God. And how could I then get up and say there were days I felt like I couldn't even touch my daughter? And there were days where I felt like I didn't want to be a mom to 3 kids. And I questioned why. Anybody ever feel like God trusts you way more than he should? Like, wait. And I was in a pit, and I don't know, my husband knew something was wrong just because he knows me so well, but I didn't even want to talk to him about it, and every time he'd try to bring it up, poor guy, God forbid our sweet husbands when they try to talk to us about something going on in our lives when we don't invite the conversation. It's like, no, my name is no, my number is no, my sign is no. And so we think, do not think that you can talk to me about it. Don't think you know what's going on. And so it was a real private struggle. And I don't know if you'll understand what I mean when I say this, but sometimes when you're in the pit, it's just easier to stay there, right? It's just easier to stay there. It's so easy to feel sorry for ourselves. In fact, some of us almost wear it like a banner over our lives, like, woe is me. I'm such a victim. And that's not to downplay, because actually many of you are legitimately true victims. But then it becomes like our flag that we wave. And we find identity in it. And we stay in the pit because, yes, it's God that gets us out of the pit. But I believe that he's actually already done everything he needs to do to get us out of the pit. It's called the cross. We actually have to do the job of taking a hold of the hand that he's extending into that pit. And sometimes it's like, it's just easier to stay here than to face the pain of it. And there was a story in the Bible in Matthew. It's actually in Matthew and Mark. It was a different account of it in Matthew. And it's a story that I've known since I was a little girl. I was first taught it in Sunday school, of Jesus walking on the water, right? And I feel like that's the miracle that we focus on, is Jesus walked on the water and then Peter walked on the water. And that's always what I thought about when I was thinking about that story. And if I'm honest, during this kind of dark stage of my life, I wasn't in the Word. I hate admitting that too. It makes me feel like such a terrible Christian, but it's just the truth. I had all my verses that were memorized, right, that I could pull out and say when I needed to say them. But I wasn't in the Word, because sometimes when you're in the Word, it's actually painful because it's a mirror. And I wasn't in the Word. So no wonder I was in the pit for longer than I needed to be. And when I finally kind of just opened it up, I read this account again, and I think I just saw the story in a different way. First, if you remember, Jesus had just done this incredible thing of feeding the 5,000, and he was going to stay back on the mountain to pray, and he sent the disciples ahead in a boat. And I think the first thing I noticed is that the disciples were like, no, come. And Jesus insisted that they go ahead by themselves. And he stayed back. Do you think he didn't know a storm was coming? So all of you who think that God doesn't allow, like all the bad stuff is only from the devil, I don't think God causes, but I do think he allows things to come into our life because we learn more about the character of the God we serve in the storm than we ever will on the mountaintop. And he sent them ahead. He said, go, because he knew what was about to unfold. And as I read that story, and they went ahead, and of course you know the story, the storm came and they freaked out and they were nervous and scared, and then all of a sudden they look up and there's a dude walking on them towards the water, and that was Jesus, and then they were freaked out again, and they're like, okay, if that's really you, Peter said, cause me to walk in the water. And I think another thing was that when he came to the boat, the storm continued. So when Jesus showed up, the storm didn't stop. It continued, and I had been begging God to stop the storm instead of realizing that he would find me in the storm. And it just changed. I began to feel a shift in my life. He didn't miraculously heal me from depression. It didn't just happen overnight. It happened through pastoral counsel, through friendship, through a strong marriage, through my church, through counseling. Do not discredit counseling. Like don't. Make sure it's Christ-centered, biblically centered, but counseling cannot be discredited because it worked in my life. It was been a process, and I'm grateful that he did lift that cloud of depression off of my life. That day that I read that story, I wrote a song that I'll sing tonight called Hurricane, if you know that song at all. But the point of the matter for me is that if you are in a storm in your life, and you just keep asking God to stop it, just you can do it, stop it, he can. But sometimes realize that you'll learn more about who he is and what he is for your life in the storm than you'll ever learn when you're out of the storm. And he's going to find you. He's going to find you in the storm. He's going to find you. He's got you.
Amen. God always has us.
Yes, always.
You know, for me, watching you, one of the things that is inspiring to me is that you balance so many things. I went to see this film with you and Charlotte, and I just fell in love with you guys from a distance because it was so neat to see you balance being a mom, being out there in the public, having a good marriage, having good friends. So talk about how you balance all of that.
Actually, most days I totally fail, but thank God I go to bed and wake up and all things are made new and I get a chance to do it over again. And I just wrote a new book, which actually I never would have done if that girl right down there didn't tell me that I actually could do it. I want to be honest with you and say that last night that message wasn't just some little clever message that she preached. She lives that message. She sets me up to win all of the time. She's the real deal in every way. She literally sat on a tour bus with me and gave me the entire outline for my new book called Finding Your Voice. How many people who write their own books, who have their own platform, who are looking to have their own agenda, sit and give it away to somebody else, not looking for any credit? That's exactly who she is. She's the real deal. But I talk about that a lot, that balance that we all have, and I think that's one of the number one questions I actually get, is how do you balance it all? And, obviously for me, my first calling is as a wife and as a mother, but I think I take that back, actually. My first calling is daughter of the King. That's actually who I am. It's an incredible calling to be a wife, and I want to do that to the best of my ability, and to be a mom, and I want to do that to the best of my ability. But I'm going to stand before God on my own. Just me. Like it's me. So first, I'm the daughter of a king. And he has a plan for my life, and one of those things is being a wife, and one of those things is being a mom, and holding this is not who I am. This is just what I get to do, and it's a privilege. But who I am is a daughter of the King. And I think so many times we limit what we think that we can do because of all the other roles that we have in our life. And so while I've often thought, okay, it's probably time for me just to stay home and I'm going to quit. Almost every day, actually, at least 2 or 3 times a week, I quit. But then I realized that if this was a job, I would have quit, actually. And I think calling is thrown around a lot, but when you do realize that it's your purpose, it's the way that God has called you to glorify himself and to help draw others to him, then you don't just treat it so irresponsibly. So one of the things that in the last few years, especially after I came out of depression, that has become important to me is self-care. And I don't know if you guys will understand this, but being raised in the church, I was taught that to put yourself first was ungodly and selfish. That the more you take care of everybody else, the better woman you are. And so women put themselves at the bottom, and they put everything else before. The Bible says love others as you love yourself, by the way. And I realized that I actually didn't love myself, and all that I was trying to do that to help me love myself. But even just 5 minutes a day of just sitting and taking a moment for myself to breathe, to put my feet up, to walk around the block, to lock myself in my car and turn whatever music I want to listen to up as loud as I want to listen to it, whatever it is, that takes a moment. Self-care is not selfish. Self-care is smart. And it actually will make you a better follower of Christ and make you a better wife and a better mom and a better coworker and a better student. And so I think I started eating better. I started exercising. I couldn't get rid of that baby weight after Sadie, and I think that part of that was that I was depressed. And for those of you who struggle with your weight, it's like this perpetual, you're depressed because you're heavy, but then you're heavy because you're depressed, and then you're depressed because you're heavy, and then you're heavy because you're depressed. It's like, I turn to food for comfort. Anybody else identify with that? Exactly. And so we fill ourselves up with something that's like an immediate, but it's actually terrible for the temple of the Holy Spirit. And I began to really get serious about the food I was eating, treating my body like a temple. And that began to do the opposite, made me feel stronger. And the stronger I felt, the better I ate, and the more I exercised. And the stronger I felt, it's like a circle in a different direction. And all of these things, I think, are practical, but they will help strengthen your life from the inside out.
Awesome. We did, and there's this amazing story that I want you to tell, because you keep talking about your best friend.
Yes.
So, yesterday...
Can I coax you back up here?
Yeah,
Can you come up here?
She had me sit on the front row I'm like her comfort blanket when
I'm
here. And I'm like, girl, you do not need a comfort blanket. You got this down, okay? You're good.
How many of you have like a friend that's your security blanket, though, right? Exactly.
I think that they would love to hear the story you told me yesterday about how you two connected. I mean, it's spectacular, and God was clearly in that.
Well, I think that's the thing I love about Charlotte. You know, we do this. I mean, I've been doing traveling and singing now for almost 2 decades. My first record deal that I told you about, that was 1999. So it's been a long time. And Christian music and her world of conferences, and it's all kind of like, I've watched a lot of different, things through the years and how they've morphed. And Christian music or Christian entertainment I hate that word. My husband, side note, said something very smart to me in the very beginning. He said, you are not in the Christian music industry. You're in the industry of selling music to Christians. Don't get it twisted. Those people out there that are trying to market you, they're not after it for Jesus. They're after it for a business. So you keep your own heart and your hands clean. That's the thing that you can control, is keeping yourself clean before the Father. And that's just a side note, but that's exactly what she's done. See, because don't get it twisted, just because someone stands up here and holds a microphone means that they've got it all going on. They can memorize, and they might be in the business of Christian speaking entertainment. There's a big difference. Just because somebody is gifted doesn't mean they're anointed. And this girl is anointed, real deal, lives it, because I've seen her real life. And she lives it fully. And the day I met her, it actually literally changed my life. And I love the way you tell the story. And besides, your accent is cooler than mine. So go.
It is a cool story, because I think a lot of people, look at what we have and what we're building and go, I would love that to happen for me, or how do I find that? Well, this was not put together by some clever marketing person, or actually the God story behind it is cool. So 11 years ago now, I was at a church called Cottonwood in California, and I was speaking at a conference there. And 11 years ago, there was no music industry in the UK, no Christian music industry. So, I didn't know anybody and knew nothing. So I was at this conference. I wasn't speaking that night. It was in the middle of worship. I was in the middle of worship, and in a clear, audible voice, and this has not happened to me before, where I thought a man had come and stood next to me, I heard God say, open your eyes, turn around. The girl at the back of the auditorium in an orange sweater and jeans is to do with your future. And it so freaked me out that I turned to my mum, who was with me, and I went, open your eyes. She's like, what? And I went, can you just turn around and tell me, is there someone at the back of this church in an orange sweater and jeans? I didn't even dare look myself. So she turns around, she turns back, and she goes, yeah, there is. How did you know? I went, don't ask. And I just thought, it must be an usher at the church, and this is weird, and I hope that music stops soon, and we'll just pretend that didn't happen. And so the worship ended, and I sat down. I was like, that was weird, but not going to do anything about it. And so then the woman that was running the conference leant forward and said, oh, excuse me. She goes, by the way, do you mind taking the offering? I was like, okay. And she goes, oh, whilst you're up there, you need to introduce the guest singer. I'm like, I don't even know who the guest singer is. She's like, it's okay, I'll give you the bio. So I get up, literally take the offering, and start to read this bio. Please introduce and welcome to the platform. And as I'm saying the words, Natalie Grant, the girl in the orange sweater. And
at this point, I always say, why was I wearing an orange sweater? That's not even my color. Like, that doesn't make sense to me.
So we'd remember.
Like, I was an orange?
She starts walking forward, and I just start prophesying over her. Like, bleh, these words are coming out my mouth, and I have no control of my mouth. I'm like, what is happening right now? She gets on the platform. She's like, bleh. I gave her this awkward hug, and I went, hi, I'm Charlotte. I don't normally do this stuff, and I'm going to go sit right back down now. And she's like, okay. It was so weird. And I just remember afterwards, she was hanging out upstairs, and she waited upstairs, and I'll never forget what she said. She said to me, what do you want from me? And what I didn't know was she was so burnt out from people wanting stuff from her. People wanting her to sing, wanting her to do a favor for her, wanting to make a connection from her. And I just simply, I wasn't being rude. I just went, I don't know. I don't want anything from you. I was like, but I have a women's conference, and I literally said these words. I can't afford you, but you're welcome to come. And she literally went, I'm coming, and I'm bringing my husband, and I don't know what's going on right now, but I think I'm supposed to come. Well, that was the experience she was talking about in the fitting room with the injection and the needle, and we just found God, and we literally just became like sisters. It was just a heart connect. You couldn't have made it up. You couldn't have made the story up. And our journey of friends was what God was forging, and it was a time in her life where I think she needed to be restored in a friendship that was safe and was good. It was a time in my life that I needed a person outside of my immediate circle of people, and it was just a God set up And we were about 4 years into the friendship, and I'll never forget, I felt God say to me, do you think I went to all of that trouble so you two could just go on vacation together? And I rang her up. I said, I think we're in trouble. I think we're supposed to like do something with this like God deal.
I'm like, oh no, you're not hearing the voice again, are you?
Yeah. And so we literally were like, okay. And we realized for every song, I had a message from the same place and the same part. So when she wrote Hurricane, I was literally upstairs in her living room writing my book, Miracle in the Middle, from the same exact scripture. And that has happened time after time. And so we felt God say, put together your music and put together the teaching material. Now listen, neither of us had room in our schedules to do nothing else. We were both maxed out. But when God tells you to do something, you better know that it's God, and then you better know to say yes. Yeah. So we started in response to that something called Dare to Be, which is an event that we put together, which is just a one-night thing that we do all through January and February, where we go to different places, and it's like 2.5 hours, her singing, me teaching. It's like a mini conference. And you know the amount of people from her world, not from mine, because I don't move in these circles, that came and said, hey, this is a great idea. Let's write you a check and make this mega, and let's do this. And we just both looked at each other and said, you know who's going to fund it? Because we're going to keep it simple. Until God tells us to do something different, it needs to start pure, and it needs to start the way God started our friendship. And so we literally wrote checks ourselves to pay for bills.
And we set up like the stage ourselves, and I'm like writing the set lists out ourselves. We're like, this is so glamorous.
Ourselves, because we couldn't afford a crew to do it for us. We literally stood on what God had told us to do and just stepped out. And now we're like 4 years in, and they just made a movie about it. And, you know, God's opened all kinds of doors for us, and we're seeing lives changed. And every night there's altars flooded. And so, but honestly, when people look at it, I think they think it came from something other. It came from a friendship 11 years ago in a room in California. And our friendship is what keeps it sweet even now.
You know, Natalie said something to me in the back. She said the thing that's so amazing about Charlotte is that what she was teaching last night is who she really is. And she's been that person for you. And so maybe just in closing, you could just share, you know, we heard this incredible message last night, but what's the practicality of setting up your girlfriend to win? Like, how does she do that for you? How do you do that for each other?
I think, you know, it's really funny because I don't even remember that I said, what do you want from me? But that really tells you the spot in life that I was in. I think it's not only the same in your friendship, it's the same in your marriage. Instead of looking at something, at how you can get something, just look at how you can give. Only God, by the way, can change that thinking in you. And I believe that the more you ask him and you just begin to do it, it will become second nature for you. Because what our human nature is what can I get? What can I get? How can this help me? And even if I help them, maybe in the end it's actually going to help me. That's our flesh. That's just normal human behavior. But the God in us says, what can I give, expecting nothing in return, not expecting that it's going to help me, but know that a byproduct of blessing others is that you will be blessed. It is the principle of God, and it happens every single time. You will be blessed in your life. When you bless others, you will be blessed. And I think that practical side is just begin to ask God, number one, to change your perspective from what can I get to what can I give. And every time that you go, just say, nope, what can I give? What can I give? What can I give? And that will not only change your friendships, you guys, that will change. Last night, I said to Charlotte, how many generations of families do you think are going to be changed now as a result of that message? Of a woman whose mother talked down to her because her mother talked down to her because her mother talked down to her and spoke
poison and lies into their life. You'll never be good enough. Your marriage is going to fail because my marriage failed and my mom's marriage failed. But now that generational curse broken, because now you're going to change the way you think to, I'm going to set my daughter up to win, and my daughter's now going to set her daughter up to win, and her daughter's going to set her daughter up to win. And now all of a sudden, it begins to change for generations to come. And that's the thing, I think, when we begin to understand the power in giving, what that does, and what that means for our own life, and the freedom that's found in putting the striving down. And women, that's hard. It's hard because by nature we're competitive and we compare and we feel less than, and when we feel less than, we act out and try to make ourselves better. And instead of realizing that we'll become better by actually focusing on making somebody else better. And I think that begins by asking God for help and then do it. Just do it. Literally, Nike's onto something. Just do it.
And I think I would say that, what I have, there's no friendship that's perfect. If you're looking for the perfect friend, then you need to realize you're not perfect. So, you're looking for something that you're not even. So, and I think friendship, I think one of the things that people have said often when they see us together is just the realness of friendship. This is not a manufactured ministry partnership. It's just two friends that are figuring it out. And we're actually, in some ways, we're similar, but in some ways, we're very different. And there's times when we totally disagree. And there's times when I'll just go quiet, because that's what I do when I'm not happy. And there's times when Nat will be very vocal, because she's not very happy, and we respond different. That's just part of our life. We're not selling you some perfect picture here that we never disagree, or there's we're working together as well as doing life together, as well as raising kids together. We get on a bus together, we put our kids on the bus. It's all manner of dysfunction. But I think to the core, I think the gift we give each other is the first thing I said last night, which is this is not a connection. This is a commitment. Yeah, and I have committed to this friendship. And when I said those words to Nat, that no, I'm your friend, I didn't mean I'm your friend because you're a singer. I didn't even know that. I didn't mean I'm your friend if you can hook me up with some of your other friends. I didn't mean I'm your friend because I'd like a trip to Nashville. I meant I'm your friend. And even last night when we got home, we were talking about some things we know in some people's lives that have been really hard. Some people that have failed recently. And we were like, where are their friends? Where is, when they fell, where was their friend? I mean, they said they were their friend, but I said to her, and she said to me, if you screw up, I'm getting on a plane. I'm going to kick your hiney and tell you, you better get your life right, girl. And I said, if you're going through disaster, I don't know what's happening in my world, but I'm on a plane because I'm committed to this friendship. And that commitment, there's a reason why you say your vows at the beginning.
Oh, it's good, Charlotte.
You say your vows at the beginning because God knew there's going to be time when you don't feel like those vows.
It's good, Charlotte.
There's going to be time when you're like, wait a minute. And I think sometimes we'd like to do the marriage and then we'll decide whether we say the vows 2 years in. Well, now I'm ready to say in sickness and in health. Well, now I'm ready to say, but no, we say the vow up front. Why? Because commitment precedes and has to go at the front of the journey. And it's the same in your friendship. There's just some commitments you make. Hey, I got your back. Not just when your back's good, but when your back's bad. And I think you set one another up to win by giving each other something you can take to the bank and you can cash it in. And I think in our Christian world, sometimes we build so shallow. And I pray we get back to the place where we build actually, I'm committed, I'm committed, I'm committed.
Incredible. Would you guys just show them some appreciation?